Hello, I'm Ralph Edwards, and this is another chapter in the oral history of Beverly Hills. We have with us, as usual, Paul Schwab, who was the youngest mayor that Beverly Hills ever had. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you kindly, Ralph, for that introduction, but also for the great amount of time, effort, and skill which you personally have contributed to this program.
Today, we're happy to present as our special guest the popular, talented, and inimitable star Jack Benny, who won world acclaim in every phase of the entertainment world and has brought world acclaim to Beverly Hills. Jack, we want to thank you very much for being a part of our little get-together here today.
Well, thank you, Ralph, for asking me to be associated with this. What would we call this?
Well, it's a project so that the people who come in years after can sit down here at the library and listen to what a wonderful city we have, because it is a unique city.
For the last few years, I've always had a Jack Benny Beverly Hills.
That's wonderful. You know, the ex-mayor here and Paul Schwab's been quite a joke teller. Paul, you had a joke you were going to tell us. Will you do that?
This attractive young woman was having trouble with her car. First, she hit the rear of a taxi. Then she backed up quickly and nearly demolished a Volkswagen. Then she moved quickly across the street where she struck and broke off a fire hydrant. A cop arrived on the scene and said, "All right, lady, let's see your driver's license." She replied, "Don't be silly, officer. Who'd give me a license?"
Jack, are you going to give him a spot on the show or not?
Well, I may try it out at the rehearsal because we always have audiences at rehearsals. And if it gets a big laugh, I'll put it in the show and I'll say that I made it up. If it doesn't get a laugh, I might still put it in the show and say that Mr. Schwab made it up.
Let's get down to the business at hand, and that's to find out about your life in Beverly Hills. We should really go back to Waukegan, your birthplace.
A lot of times I don't like to tell my right age because I figure as long as I kid so much about being 39, then it isn't funny to keep saying how old I really am. However, there are occasions when I do tell my right age, and the reason I tell it because nearly everybody knows it anyway. I was born in Waukegan, Illinois in 1894. So that gives you a little clue. Well, my parents lived in Waukegan, that's where I was born, or sometimes I can say I was born in Chicago because I was carried in Waukegan and they took me to a hospital in Chicago to be born. And I always say if I kicked around in Waukegan for 9 months, I can say I was born in Waukegan.
Now, did your musical education start there, Jack?
I studied violin in Waukegan. Started to study when I was about 6 or 7 years old. Then, a little later, I went to the Chicago Musical College and studied with a great teacher called Hugo Korchak. And I studied then until I was about 14. And would you believe it, that I dropped the violin until 15 years ago. Now, that means that for almost 48 years, I hadn't touched the violin. In 8 months, I was in Carnegie Hall, which shows you the kind of guts that I've got. I started out in show business in vaudeville. And if you remember, vaudeville had the Orpheum Circuit. And the Orpheum Circuit included the Orpheum Los Angeles, which was one of their very big weeks, one of their important weeks. The two important weeks for San Francisco and Los Angeles. Whenever I would come here to play the Orpheum, I lived then in Los Angeles, but I would always come to Hollywood and always come to Beverly Hills. But that's when I first came here. The first date I ever played away from home was Gary, Indiana. Now, I started in radio in New York, and I was there, I started in 32, and about 34 or 35, I moved to Los Angeles to do my shows from here, and then we built a home on Roxbury Drive, where I lived for nearly 30 years. We only moved away from there about 5 years ago because my wife thought she'd like an apartment. I knew she wouldn't, but you cannot convince anybody until they try it. So we moved into a beautiful apartment, And we were only there about a couple of weeks, and I took one look at Mary's face, and I said, "You don't like an apartment, do you?" She says, "No." I said, "Then we better start looking for a home." So about 2 years ago, we moved into another beautiful home, which is almost the first street out of Beverly Hills, which is Charing Cross Road. But I still call Beverly Hills my home.
What was the address up there on Roxbury?
1002 North Roxbury Drive, right next door from where Lucille Ball lives, and a couple of doors from Jimmy Stewart's home. And when I first met Mary, she was selling hosiery in the May Company. Now, I must tell you a cute little story about that. Mary went to Lucille Ball once, who was the wrong person to go to with this line. And she said to Lucille Ball, she said, "Just think, I used to work for Mrs. Tom May at the May Company. And now we own a home that we bought from Tom May in Palm Springs. Isn't that something?" So Lucille Ball, you think that's something, says, "I used to be an extra at RKO, and now I own the studio."
Now, Jack, if you don't mind, can we get back to the neighbors? I think Eddie Cantor was one of them. Can you
Yes.
tell any stories about Eddie or any of the Stewarts or the Colmans? I remember you used to put the Ronald Colmans into your radio script. Was that a put on?
I always said that Mr. and Mrs. Ronald Colman lived next door. Now, the reason I said that, because, you know, for a couple of years, we had them on our radio show. And it made a funnier script when I said they lived next door. I'd always make him very aloof to me.
Oh.
Eddie Cantor lived a few doors north of us on Roxbury Drive. And Jimmy Stewart lived across the street on the same side of the street.
Lucille Ball.
And Lucille Ball, of course, now lives next door. Eddie Cantor and I had been friends for many, many years. But he was usually in big New York productions while I was in vaudeville, and I played the Palace. But we became good friends. Jolson, Eddie Cantor, all of us.
Jack, do you know of any other motion picture or television or radio people who lived in Beverly Hills?
Hobart Bosworth lived in Beverly Hills.
I'm told he used to ride a white horse. Isn't that right, Paul, up the bridle path in Sunset?
That's right.
It's a family who lived next door to me in the house where Lucille Ball lives now. Friends of ours would ring their bell thinking it was my home, and they got so fed up with it that they finally put a sign in front of their house that says Jack Benny and Mary Livingston do not live here. They live next door. Irene Dunn lives in Beverly Hills. Doris Day, I believe. Gloria Swanson, I think. And of course there's Mary Pickford. The Douglas Fairbanks lived here, the juniors, until they moved to England. Harold Lloyd lived here in Beverly Hills until recently when he passed away. Now, of course, you know George Burns and Gracie. Gracie Allen lived in Beverly Hills, not far from us. So did Robert Taylor, Groucho Marx.
Matter of fact, we bought our house from Groucho Marx over at 710 North Hillcrest Road.
Now, Jimmy Durante, I know, lives in Beverly Hills. And, of course, Jimmy Stewart's, who lived just a few doors from us. And Ray Milland's, Lionel Barrymore, Wallace Beery. Of course, Claudette Colbert lived in Beverly Hills. And we were very dear friends.
Jack, I remember when you were very kind to do a mystery contest. The subject, The Walking Man, on Truth or Consequences, that raised so much money for the American Heart Association.
When I was the Walking Man, this really did start something also for me personally, but it also had me annually making speeches at heart funds. And in Florida, Dr. DeBakey spoke, and he mentioned about the Walking Man, and wherever I go they mention it, you know, and it all started with that Walking Man.
That was on the Truth or Consequences show long back ago, I guess about 1949. Now, as so many people do in the business, our business, show business, many times work at home.
We worked a lot at home, but I had my office on Camden Drive. We usually work in the office. If I'm tired and I want to be home, they come to the house.
Did you ever have a Maxwell Park?
I never owned a Maxwell. That is one of the things on the show that is not true, one of the few things. We did a scene once where I was supposed to have traded a car for another second-hand car, and any car we would have picked. It could have been a Stanley Steamer, the Rio. We happened to pick Maxwell.
Now, did Don Wilson and Rochester, and of course Mary was there, did they all used to come over to the house and rehearse beforehand?
No, because in the days of radio, we only rehearsed the day before, so that would be done in the studio.
I know Paul Schwab showed me a list of dates outlining the number of times you appeared as master of ceremonies at the Chamber of Commerce banquets here in Beverly Hills. Do you have any idea how many that was?
Because I never realized I did so many, Ralph. You know, I took it over after Will Rogers. Remember, he did it for years. Then I found out that I did it in 1941, in 1946 and 7, in 1948 and 49 at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Then in 1957 and in 1965 at the Beverly Hilton Hotel.
You should have won an Oscar with all that, you know.
Yeah, well, I never won an Oscar.
Is that a thorn in the side to you?
Never. Let me show you the people who have not won Oscars. Greta Garbo never won an Oscar.
You win.
That's enough, isn't
That's
it?
enough. You really is.
I don't think Chaplin ever won one. Garbo, Chaplin, and Benny never won Oscars. That's real good company.
Okay.
I did make one picture once that I thought merited at least a nomination, and that was a picture called To Be or Not to Be that I made with Carol Lombard. I was her co-star with Ernst Lubitsch directing it. But I think the thing that hurt that was that she was killed, you know, in this crash immediately after the picture. And we all felt so low about it where we dropped all publicity. That picture today is still a big smash all over Europe. They play it year after year. And right now in Spain, it's been playing for months and months and months.
And
That's
the horn
right.
blows at midnight.
Yeah,
Don't forget
well, that was supposed to be my bad one. And I'll admit it was. Now, the people who see it today claim it wasn't so bad.
It wasn't.
No, well, you know why? That's because I've been panning it so much.
Well, I don't know. I liked it when I saw it the first time, and I like it every time I see it on the darn late night show. Now, you have lived in Beverly Hills, and I see you out taking walks all the time. I think that's why I got the idea of calling you the walking man. And I must say, you've got a walk that's very distinguished. I was with Phil at the time he made this historic line.
Statement.
When we
put a dress on me and take me anywhere.
That's right.
That's
we
right.
were in Boston for the March of Dimes.
Right.
Now, Irving Fine, you're president of your company. I didn't know whether he was putting me on or not about a little girl knocking at tricks or treat time, and it turned out to be Elizabeth
Well,
Bennet.
I'll tell you what it was. What did the kids call a garbage hunt? And they sent Elizabeth.
Garbage hunt?
Yeah,
They
that's
do call
something
it
like
that.
that. And they sent Elizabeth Taylor to my home when she was a little girl to try and get my violin. But they let me know ahead of time that they were going to do that. And they told me to stall her as long as possible, and they will hide a microphone in the house and have it on a record. So Elizabeth Taylor came over for my violin. She says, please let me have it as soon as possible, because if I can get that back in time, I win whatever she was winning. And I said, if you want this violin to take back, you're going to have to listen to me play it. And I kept playing it until I thought she'd go crazy. Then I let her have it. So she took it, and then they rushed over to get the record and brought it over to the house and played it for her.
That's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing. Have you ever talked to her about this
Oh,
later?
sure, whenever I see her.
Speaking of your violin, among all the other things you do, you find time to go out to help the symphonies of our nation.
When we got to Jacksonville, Florida, a few months ago, we went over the $5 million mark. Whenever we do charities of that kind, I think there's also a little selfish motive. And my selfish motive is the fact that I love to play the violin, and I love to play with symphony orchestras, and it makes me practice. Now, that doesn't mean that I play well, but when Isaac Stern, the great violinist, when he is asked, because he's my closest friend in the music world, how well does Jack Benny play the violin, he has the perfect answer. He says he plays well enough for his purpose. And I have been giving these concerts now for the past 15 years. Maybe $5 million may not sound a lot for 15 years, but it is a lot when you realize that I can only give 4 or 5 a year.
We know how difficult it is to raise money. When we said, would you come down at the opening of the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion and help us get started, there you came and did your famous bit there with the violin. And I think people were really amazed at how very well you played.
The good thing that happened was the fact that I did not practice and become a real good violinist, because then I would not have thought of giving the humorous concerts, the comedy concerts. You see, this way, they know when I'm playing with the symphony orchestra, I am actually trying to play well. And the fact that I can't quite make it is what's funny.
Jack Benny did back-to-back benefits out here just recently. One was the diabetic benefit with Lucille Ball as the guest of honor, and the other, of course, was our anniversary, the motion picture Relief Fund.
I would have been very much hurt if I were asked on that big one, on both of them, really.
Beverly Hills has undergone some changes since you first moved in with Mary over on Roxbury. Do you notice many of these changes, or have you grown along with it so much that you haven't?
I've noticed very big changes in Beverly Hills. I think Beverly Hills has developed faster and greater than almost any city in the United States. I think Beverly Hills is in a very unique position.
I don't think anyone outside of Will Rogers has carried the name of Beverly Hills and carried it so beautifully and honestly and with admiration from your fellow citizens as you have. I'm sure that all the thousands and thousands of people who will hear your voice for years and years to come will be most grateful to you. We hope that the 39 years go on and on and on and on, and that there'll always be a Jack Benny.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you very much, and to you too, Mr. Schwab.